All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode. Like I said, we're staying good and consistent with these, right? Form Check Friday, the one and only. We take your videos, we put them up on the screen behind me, and I offer my wisdom in critiquing your lifts. And if anybody's interested in how to submit, what you're going to do is you're going to head over to calgarybarbell.com right here. You're going to click on FCF. Just like that. You scroll on down. I mean, you can always check this out if you're interested in some fantastic training programs in our app. And there's all kinds of information you can give us here. You can attach a link to Google Drive or YouTube Short or whatever. Feel free and make sure that you do give us some context in this, any additional info and comments section. The people who give us more context are more likely to get picked. A lot of the times if the video just comes in and it's like, this is a weight, we might not pick it. If you have specific questions or issues you're dealing with, that gives me a lot more to go off of in terms of these critiques. So we left off last week with Koen. Now, Koen's doing some deadlifts. He's got 155 kilos on the bar here. He says he's been training powerlifting for about 6 months, and that his deadlift always feels awkward. Now, he said his max is about 200 kilos, and he says he's having a hard time with the slack pull and feeling comfortable in his setup. Now, if anybody watched last week, we left Koen's deadlift up for the commenters, and hopefully we got some good constructive criticism there. People are usually really great in those comment sections. Now, the big thing that that I sort of maybe alluded to last week was his feet. And if you're wondering why I did that, let's just watch this rep real quick. See how we're kind of like forward on the foot, we're backwards on the foot, we're rolling inwards, we're rolling outwards. I think one of your big things, and maybe the first thing I would look at, Koen, is what you're doing with your feet. I think a lot of your body position, a lot of the lift itself is actually pretty darn good, but I think we're having balance issues. First and foremost. And I think you're going to have a hard time setting up. You're going to have a hard time pulling the slack. You're going to have a hard time with the deadlift as a whole if you're constantly trying to catch your balance mid deadlift. And I think the issue here is that your toes are pointed too far out. The more your toes point out, right? So that's maybe your normal angle of your feet if we're looking down from the lifter's perspective. If you are like this, think about how much less. And again, this is very crude drawing, but think about how much less how much less base of support you have and how much more of a thin line that center of gravity is. So when you're lifting the weight, you're getting pulled forward maybe slightly, and that's going to really throw you off because your base of support is so small because we're toed out so far. So the first thing I would do is bring those toes in a little bit. So we're a little bit more straightforward with the toe angle. And I think honestly a lot is going to, correct itself just from that. Now, in terms of the slack pull, I think you actually do quite a good job here. The whole idea with the slack pull, maybe we could do a little more of pushing as we sit the hips down. So I can see here, you kind of pull the hips down into position, but if we're not actively resisting pulling ourselves down into position, we're not going to feel that slack pull like we could. So I want you to actually begin your push at this position. Start creating some quad tension. Resist yourself in pulling your hips down. Quad tension, then pull the hips down. That's going to help you find this sort of glute and hamstring tension. Then tighten the back and then go. But I think your slack pull actually looks good. Your lockout looks really unbalanced there. And maybe we rush a little bit into rep 2. So the thing is, if we have trouble with the slack pull, like this pull, we're way back. We had another pull, we were a little more forward. I think our back angle is a little bit different from pull to pull. The other thing I would have you do is just slow down a little bit between lifts. Try to treat every set like a bunch of little singles with no rest, if that makes sense. And what the goal there is to try to get more consistency out of your deadlift, because I think that's really one thing that's missing. So consistency, and let's work on that foot position, see if we can get a bit better balance. Our next lifter here is McKenzie. Now McKenzie's doing some squats. So let's take a look here. Now, McKenzie's going for 270. This is 2 sets of 5 here, about 85%-ish McKenzie's 16 years old, definitely not 60 years old, young guy here. Lives in BC. He said he's recently been dealing with some knee pain and now is squatting much more vertical with his shin position, and says that feels a lot better. Wondering how I think his new technique looks and thoughts on the dynamic effort method or dynamic effort training. So first off, we're going to get into the squat. Now, the first thing I notice about the squat is this unrack, right? When we unrack and when we walk out, we have really, really high elbows. We're really kind of crunched forward. I don't think we're doing a good job creating a nice tight shelf for the bar on the unrack. And the way that you approach the bar, the way you pick the bar up, really sets the tone for the lift. So if we're walking out and we're feeling like the bar's kind of crunching into us and we're having trouble getting our footing, that's going to set you up more often than not for less of a proficient squat than maybe we could be achieving. So in this case, I want you to take more time with your setup. I want you to try to open your chest a little bit, pull the shoulders back, try to get the elbows a little more in line with the body, find some good upper back tension. Think about getting the lats involved, in terms of pulling the elbows in towards the sides, and try to create a shelf where that bar sits relatively comfortably without having to be super crunched over and having your elbows up really far behind you. Now, once we get the bar into position and we initiate our first squat, I think we actually get into a pretty darn good squat. I think given that you had some knee pain, you went for a little bit less forward knee travel, that feels better. Great. Honestly, great. I think if you're going to compete in, CPU or IPF affiliates, BCPA would be your local one in BC, we're going to need a little bit more depth. So that would be another thing I would work on, is trying to get a little bit more depth. You might need to try a little more ribs down brace. And I know this kind of counteracts what I was telling you with the setup, because I think in the setup we're too crunched over, and I think in the squat we're a little bit too extended. What I want is like an ideal middle ground of that we can maintain from the walkout to the descent to the ascent. And we have this similar, good, consistent back angle from start to finish in the squat. Consistency is king. You'll notice me talk a lot about that. The movement of the squat itself looks great. I would love to see a little bit more depth, and other than that, wonderful. Now, in terms of my thoughts on, we get a lot of these questions on our live streams every Friday. If you're interested in stopping by, it's here on the YouTube, it's over on Twitch. We do form check reviews just like this. I lift on stream. It's a good time. Twitch.tv/Calgary Barbell, or just come by the channel. My thoughts on the dynamic effort method, I would say for most people, especially beginners, probably not super useful way to spend your time. Now, one of the issues I have with it is that the dynamic effort method, as my understanding of it goes anyways, is putting a lot of emphasis on moving the bar fast. It's on speed. It's on really accelerating against the bar. And I think when we're rather new, trying to move fast for the sake of moving fast can lead to really uncoordinated efforts. I think that good quality training, regardless of the pace, is going to beat out moving fast for the sake of moving fast most of the time, especially when we're talking about more novice lifters. There is a certain benefit to having a quality of movement, and often that quality of movement is coupled with a bit of patience, maybe a bit of a tempo, a little bit more of a sort of nuanced and thoughtful approach to it. So I would say for most people, the dynamic effort method, at least as it's laid out in a lot of those old like West Side tomes, using like 30% of your bar weight and stuff like that, like you might as well just put in a nice light squat day in the week and do some sets of 5 at like a 6 RPE, right? Go ahead and lift light. That's okay to have a light day where you kind of go in, move through the motions and really kind of grease the groove. But if you're intentionally using like 30 and then 32 and 34% of your max, like why? And also just moving fast for the sake of moving fast, I just don't think you're gonna get that much out of it. You might as well strain very moderately, barely over a warm up, and go in and just move through some good solid reps, maybe get a little bit of a hypertrophy benefit out of it from, using a load that's more than 30%. And yeah, those are my thoughts on. Our next lifter here comes from my old stomping grounds, the Strength Edge. And so shout outs to TSE and everybody training there. This is Kylie. Now Kylie's benching 82.5 kilos for a triple, which is damn good. Very impressive. Now she said she could have paused better, but happy to be tripling 5 kilos off of comp max. So I would say, you know, also training's going really well. Now, what she's wondering is she'd love advice on incorporating leg drive. She feels she's not getting any leg drive. So my take on leg drive is generally that a lot of people think about leg drive as this like jolt kind of to accelerate the bar, and I think my take on leg drive is much more that it should be a consistent and supportive thing. We want to be using leg drive to reinforce positioning, using leg drive to keep the chest height consistent, using leg drive to drive the body up the bench so that this point of contact here acts as an anchor and pulls the shoulder blades down while the rest of the body moves backwards, kind of, you know, enhancing and supporting the arch. So a lot of what I talk about in the leg drive is even, you know, pushing, almost like you're pushing back on a rolly chair, is a great cue. I got that from Taylor, one of our Calgary Barbell coaches. And I think a lot of people think more about upwards pressure with the leg drive. I think more about pressure, you know, pushing your head off the back of the bench almost. The other thing I'm going to mention here is going to be that I want you to work on setting the leg drive before you unrack. If we don't feel the leg drive, if we're not getting that support from the legs, don't unrack it, right? Because leg drive should be a consistent thing. It should be part of the setup, and it should be there from unrack to re-rack, right? It's that tightness and that tension should be, you know, the same throughout the whole lift. So work on that, get it consistent before you unrack, keep it consistent throughout the set, and I think that's probably going to be the best way to work on leg drive. Now, in terms of the press, I actually did notice something on this third rep. We were starting to lose back position a little bit, and this could be part and parcel with that leg drive. But the other thing I'm going to mention is that as you get into your touch, we are seeing the shoulders barely move just a little bit, and you can see that as the elbows kind of go outwards in the pause. So just watch right here on this third rep. So we try to really accelerate off the chest, and I think a lot of the times, just like trying to be quick off the floor in the deadlift, we can kind of get out of the groove by trying too hard to go fast. And this goes back into my, you know, whole take on the dynamic effort method. When we try to accelerate and be explosive and be fast, a lot of times we forego positioning. And what happens here on this third rep is the elbows flare out a little early. The bar is driven, you know, away from where we want it to go. At best, it's straight up. But ideally, we want that bar to kind of come back over the shoulders. Now, if we just take a quick second when we initiate the pause, we really think about keeping the back tight, using the back as part of the initiation of the pause, and allowing it to even move at the tiniest little bit slow for that first few millimeters so that we can have really, really good positioning. And then as soon as that bar's moving and you can feel it's in the good groove, then go for it, then accelerate, then, you know, put some stank on it, put some oomph into it. So those are my pieces of advice on the bench. You know, you're clearly doing great, so keep up the good work. And yeah, I hope that helps. Before the last lifter, I just want to take a quick second and say thank you to everybody who has been liking the videos, hitting the notification bell, leaving their comments and stuff. The algorithm is smiling upon us. We are seeing a little bit more progress and things kind of moving forward at a better pace since we've asked you all to do this. We really, really appreciate it. If y'all could keep it up, we would continue to really appreciate it, and we're going to continue to make this good for y'all. Our next lifter here is Vemal. Now, Vemal's doing some deadlifts. I'm going to crop this a little bit better. Vemal's doing 170 kilos here for a set of 4 reps. Now, he says that his 1 rep max is 210, but that his technique on that was a little dicey. Now, he says he can lift lighter weights without breaking down, without his form breaking down, but when he goes heavy, he says he loses his back position, right? So he goes into a little bit more flexion than he thinks he would like to. He also mentioned specifically sometimes it's very hard for him to break the weights off the floor, and that it's hard for him to keep his back tight. So what I want is for everybody to head down to the comments section below, leave your thoughts on how Vemal can improve here. Offer some notes. Maybe you've had these kinds of problems yourself in the past. What did you do? Was there an exercise that helped you, build a little bit more tension off the floor or fix your back position? Was there some sort of protocol? Were there some cues that worked for you? If so, I want you to share them with Vemal. I'm going to start with Vemal next week, next Friday on Form Check Friday, and we'll see you then.